Hello, and welcome to Nothing Ever Happens in Canada, but we know this is simply not true. This is a Canadian podcast about the myths, legends, and just good old stories Canada has to tell. I'm Canadian Girl. Thanks for joining me today on this UFO adventure. We're off to Quebec to find out what's going on with all these strange lights that were seen in the skies around the early 90s, but more importantly, were seen by so many people. Bring your binoculars, detective hats, or tinfoil hats, whichever you prefer, as we go searching the skies over Montreal and a town known today as Maryville in Quebec for possible UFOs. Our story starts in Maryville, Quebec, on Monday, November 20th, 1989, at 5:30 a.m. Mr. and Mrs. P, whose real names have been kept anonymous, would see a strange blue light just outside their window. As the pair tried to figure out what was going on, they noticed they could feel a vibration and could hear something, almost like a generator, was running nearby. The blue light was so illuminating, it seemed to be all around their house. They could not tell where it was coming from or the generator sound. Just 300 yards or 900 feet down the road, the P's neighbor, Mr. R, who also chose to remain anonymous, was awakened by the bright blue light. What he saw he will never forget. 4 incredibly bright blue balls of light hovered over the P's house. He claimed the light to be flashing on and off, but did it very, very slowly. When they came back on, they would be in a different position. Mr. R also claims to have felt the vibrations that his neighbors felt, and he also heard what sounded like a generator running. Mr. R noticed as the strange light moved close to Highway 112, the streetlights that were near the object would dim as it passed. Mr. R estimated the object was about 30 feet off the ground. A third witness, Mrs. N, and in some stories they call her Mrs. G, was in the kitchen at 6 a.m. She claims when she saw a bright blue light through her window, and she heard a strange noise like a machine running. She decided to approach her window to get a better look. What she saw was a bright blue ball of light, and she noticed the streetlights nearest it were sparking like crazy. And then the object slowly faded away, disappearing on and off. And as it did that, her electricity dimmed so low she feared it would go out. As the object reappeared brightly moments later, her electricity came back on full power. It did this again and again until the last time the object disappeared for good, her hydro went out completely for at least 10 minutes. Just 2 days after the neighborhood sighting took place and the initial shock wore off, the P's were brave enough to go outside again, and when they did, what they found in their own backyard shocked them. A strange circle pattern was left in the grass on their property just 150 feet from their home and the window where they had seen such a bright blue light the other night. A complete circle with a 65-foot or 20-meter diameter, completely flattened down in the grass and the snow. On November 23rd, 3 days later, the RCMP would come inspect the strange circle left behind for themselves. They could clearly see it, everyone could. The RCMP would return again 5 days later, after hearing tales about the circle now being completely a different color after the town received a 2-day rainstorm. Now that the snow was gone, the difference in color between the grass outside the circle and inside the circle was clear. It was bright green, and I mean a lot brighter green. That's right, the circle where the object had just been seen a few nights ago had now become a crazy bright green color that no one could explain. It has lasted for years. Nothing ever grew quite right in that spot ever again. You can head to nothingcanada.com and check out the show notes section to see pictures for yourself, or of course, The links are always in the show notes below. You can even look up the strange circle on Google Earth I have read and see it that way too, though I have not tried myself. Paranormal investigator Christian Page claims to have gone to the site a few days after the sighting took place and took a soil sample, which he sent to the soil department of the Laval University for testing. The results showed the chlorophyll level in the vegetation had gone up 1,000%, and the nitrogen level was found to be 500 times higher than normal. The university claimed there was nothing on Earth, natural or artificial, that could produce those results. Another interesting piece to the story, the Farnham military base just a few kilometers away, were they doing some kind of tests? Of course, they're not saying. Now, I'm not saying these stories are related, because I have no proof of that. I just found a few things in common between them. They both take place in November. There were bright, unexplainable lights seen by numerous witnesses, and they happened only 43 kilometers or 26 miles apart within 1 year's time. It all seemed just very straight up strange. So let's head to the city of Montreal back on November 7th, 1990. It was an early evening on that Wednesday night, and it was very cold and clear. Our story here takes place at the International Hilton Bonaventure Hotel. This giant iconic concrete building was built over the old Bonaventure train station in 1965. Just 2 years later, in 1967, it was listed as the world's largest building at just over 3 million square feet, and she was once the city's main convention center. Today, it has 397 rooms, 5 luxury suites, conference halls, and a very delicious restaurant known as Cube with a K. While all that does sound really nice, we're more interested in its famous rooftop pool. Seriously, this isn't just any rooftop pool. It's an oasis that makes you forget you are in downtown Montreal. It's surrounded by trees, plants, gardens, and walkways, 2.5 acres of them on the rooftop. You can see pictures of this amazing rooftop pool and oasis at nothingcanada.com under the show notes section, or of course, the links are always in the notes below. Over the southeast corner of the pool at about 7:15 p.m., a woman was swimming in the pool when she looked up and saw some very strange, bright beams of light, and they were all pointing towards the hotel. She signaled to the lifeguard on duty to have a look. There was about 12 other people on the roof at the time. The lifeguard immediately called hotel security, Albert Sterling. Shortly after the commotion started, a journalist from the popular newspaper, the La Presse or the La Presse, I'm not sure how to say this properly. I'm gonna say the La Presse. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, guys. He was tipped off by the lifeguard at about 7:30 p.m. The hotel security would call the police shortly after reaching the rooftop and seeing the object become even brighter and larger. When Officer Francois Lippe, again, I hope I'm saying this right, arrived to the rooftop at 8:11 p.m., he saw the 3 stationary strange lights as well. Around the same time, a mother driving her daughter on Champlain Boulevard in southwest Montreal, near the Douglas Hospital, claimed to have seen 2 large white spots in the sky, just 4.2 miles or 6.7 kilometers southwest of the hotel. Hotel security Albert Sterling also tried to call the Montreal International Airport but could not get through, which he thought was very odd. At 8:20 p.m., Officer Lippe requested the Chief of Police, Robert Mason's assistance for backup. When Chief of Police Mason arrived, he thought it was some kind of optical illusion from the adjacent construction site. He immediately ordered all the lights be turned off on the site. Unfortunately, it was not an optical illusion, so the strange lights remained in the sky. What's interesting about this event is that all the witnesses reported seeing something different, but at the same time had some similarities in their story, leaving many scratching their heads. How could there be so many witnesses on this rooftop yet they all saw something slightly different. At times, it was said there was as many as 75 people on the rooftop. The lights continued to hover in the sky above the rooftop pool. Some say they were in a circular pattern. Some say it was more of an oval. Lights were reported to be yellow, orange, reddish, green, and blue, just like our first story. As luck would have it, a plane would fly by the area, allowing them to gain some knowledge of the unknown object's size. Let's just say the strange lights dwarfed the plane passing by. Estimated at 540 meters wide, or 1,771 feet, that's just a bit smaller than the CN Tower is tall, and was hovering about 8,000 to 10,000 feet above the ground. The strange lights got so much attention that night, the RCMP, the Department of National Defense, and even NASA were contacted to see if they were running military tests in the area, and all the agencies stated they were not, and could not explain the event. All airports in the area reported nothing strange on their radars that evening. It's 9 p.m., and the strange lights are still putting on a show. That's almost 2 hours later. Even more witnesses had made their way to the rooftop. Hotel guests and employees had come and gone. More police officers had arrived, the district director, and more journalists. Maurice LaRoche, again, I hope I said that right, the La Presse photographer, is the man who captured the famous photo that day. He took that photo right about here at about 9:05 p.m. A hotel guest who was an Air Canada pilot stated there was no way those lights were from a plane. At 9:45 p.m., RCMP officer Minkoff arrived on the rooftop. About half-hour later, around 10:10 p.m., the clouds began to lower and the lights disappeared into them. No one knows how long they were there after that. You can see a video from CBC and the photos taken by the journalists from the La Presse and see the strange lights for yourself at nothingcanada.com under the show notes section, or of course, they're in the show notes below. More recently, in 2014, there was another strange light sighting in the Montreal area. A green light was seen during a live broadcast as a TVA news reporter was in Montreal. You can see the video, of course, in the show notes. Within 24 hours of this strange event, all the files relating to the incident were marked classified and tucked away. This sent the public into a tidal wave of conspiracy theories to consider. The chief of police, Mason, did admit years later he felt the military was not being honest with him when they said they had no idea what had gone on that November night in 1999. He in fact told a Canadian TV show looking into the case in 2005. He is quoted as saying, "I am convinced that I saw something that wasn't made by any inhabitants of this planet. There is no doubt in my mind it came from somewhere else other than Earth." End quote. Today, this event in Montreal over the rooftop pool is considered one of Canada's most credible and widely reported UFO sightings. Even more interesting, Montreal was recently named as Canada's most visited province by UFOs. Around 10:30 p.m., a young man, Pierre Coumartin, I hope I said that right, was driving home from work and observed a strange group of bright lights that were in the shape of a boomerang. He got out of his car to take a better look and could hear a purring sound, he claimed. It was flying very low in the sky near the Hydro-Quebec power station on Long Point? Hope I said that right. Not long after this, the Long Point military base, which is the largest military base of the Montreal Canadian Forces garrison, is fed directly by the power plant and would experience power failures that night at 11:08 p.m. and again at 11:50 p.m. Even more interesting, no one on the military base reported seeing any strange lights that night. Only the unsuspecting citizens of Montreal that night. Now, I'm not saying it was them, but I found it interesting that the unknown object was right near their military base, and no one saw a thing. So what was flying around that night and almost 1 year ago on the same November night? Was it just some military project running a test? Why did so many people see the same thing and describe it in similar ways, but also in different ways from each other? And who or what left that bright green circular mark in Maryville? Was it possibly someone else visiting from another planet, and they just happened to stop by around the same time every year? To my Quebec listeners out there, now I know we just missed it, but come next November and even October, I'd say start watching those skies if you're near the Montreal area to see if our strange, very bright light kind of visitor returns. I'm Canadian Girl. Until next time, my friends. Want to help support the show? You can do that in 3 simple ways. The first one, you can leave us a shiny 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. This small gesture means so much to this podcast as it allows us to move around on the podcast charts and meet more awesome listeners like you. The second, you can stop by our souvenir shop and pick up a souvenir from one of our great adventures and take it on your very own. There's t-shirts, water bottles, notebooks, and so much more. Do head over to our souvenir shop today and grab some adventure gear. And finally, the third way you can help support the show is by donation. We have a fancy PayPal button that can be found on the top right of our webpage. This button allows you the option to donate as much as you want, whenever you want. All donations will be used for the channel by buying new books for research and upgrading equipment. All 3 links to help support the show, of course, can be found in the show notes below. I thank you all so much for your support of the show. It means the world to me.